Welcome back to more SOVL PvP. Today we are playing our first game in the inaugural SOVL Discord Cup. This game is going to be against Alhael. I'm not entirely sure that's how you pronounce it, but they're a really strong player and they're bringing their Elven Conclaves. But what are we pitting against it? What list did we eventually submit to the tournament?
Who's that Pokemon?
After some really good comments on the video and in Discord, decided to go with Reptilian Kingdoms. Mentioned in the last video that one of the cons of it is that I'm not that experienced with it, but in the end that was actually what tipped it over for me. Just an excuse, a chance to play something new, and yes, if I inevitably lose some matches, then can always blame it on me not really having much experience with the list. But looks like, as we take a look at the breakdown of factions submitted in the tournament, I'm not alone there in liking the lizards. Bit of a surprise. I mean, I do think they're strong. I think they're super solid, but you don't often see them that much on the ranks ladder. At least I don't. So yeah, surprised that they're by far the most represented faction. Outside of that, not too many surprises. Good amount of Empire, Undead, and Goatmen. They're all reasonably popular factions. No dwarves, but I don't think that's because they're necessarily bad. I just think a tournament of this size, inevitably there are going to be some factions not represented, but actually it's really nice that every other army is represented outside of that, so a really nice mix. But moving on to our first match, and I'm recording this ahead of the game so I can talk about my strategy and maybe predictions, and then we can see how it all plays out. But yeah, we're going up against this 4-unit Conclave list with 3 really scary units. They have, Dragon Knights are always pretty scary, just the hand weapon and shield. I don't think anything in my army goes toe to toe with that in a fair fight. But also they're really kitted out their Elf Noble with Relentless, giving them additional attack, and Potion of Power, just once per use. So yeah, 2 really scary units, which I don't think any of my units win against in a fair fight. So in order to defeat them, I'm going to want to team up, maybe play the flea game a little bit, kind of stay together and be a bit patient. However, the one thing going against that is this big block of Elf City Guard and their shooting. And in the few games, sort of practice games I had with this list, I think the lizards really don't like going up against shooting. And although I mentioned like they're all kind of slightly speedy, then they're not incredibly fast either. So yes, while I'm going to want to kind of be patient and stay together to take on these units, especially if there are no objectives. So, in this tournament, it's random whether there's objectives or not. So we really want to see objectives to kind of force my opponent to come to me, because otherwise they can kind of sit back a little bit. And then if I do come to them, use the mobility of the Eagle and the Noble to kind of get around me, kind of draw me in. They can flee pretty well, or really well with the rallying cry ability on the Noble. However, they don't really have the number of units to capitalize on it. And I think that's one thing going in my favor. Often, if you do flee, you then want more units there to kind of like jump on their unit that kind of failed the charge. I think the snakes are going to, in my list, are going to be one of the more important units, because they're one of the, probably the only unit in my army that can go face to face with one of these and survive one round of combat to allow their allies to kind of get around. And then in terms of screening against the shooting, definitely going to prioritize trying to keep safe the T-Rex, and then the lizard and the pterodactyls are pretty fragile as well. Actually got knocked out of the last SOVL Showdown tournament by a similar Conclave list with some shooting and some flying stuff. So looking to get my revenge here. So let's take a look at what happened in game 1. And as a reminder, this is a best of 3 games, random map, random scenario. So we did not get any objectives in this first one, and we're playing first, which means my opponent gets that all-important final move. In terms of deployment, kind of deploy in the middle as a blob. Because there are no objectives, I'm going to kind of have to go after my opponent, I'm thinking, or risk just getting shot to pieces by their city guard. And setting up the middle means I can go left or right depending on what side they deploy, because I do expect that they will deploy one side or the other. Take a look at my opponent's deployment. Yeah, they set up here on my right, their left. So yeah, let's get into this one. Kind of as I guess I mentioned in the plan, start just moving up as one, trying to protect those flanks. Right now I'm not in any threat of any flanks from the flyers just yet this early on. My opponent decides to shoot the jungle swarm, and I'm completely fine with that. I was a bit worried at some point that they might have the ability to shoot through into one of these units, but yeah, fairly happy there. Everything fairly normal, but then decide to get a little bit aggressive, over-aggressive, bit hasty maybe. Move up my pterodactyls here. First to kind of cut off the noble, preventing them from doing any sort of shenanigans. But actually what it does mean in hindsight, and in fact, as soon as I made this play, I kind of regretted it, because it means that I'm now going to have to move them out of the way, or my opponent could just shoot them. And I think, these are going to be a pretty key piece to combat the mobility from my opponent's flyers as well. I was also partly hoping that my opponent would kind of take the bait with the noble here, and then I could get a flee, but opponent wisely doesn't take the bait, and no charges declared that round. My opponent doesn't take the shot on the pterodactyls straight away, instead kind of waiting to see what happens. And I don't know, maybe I was a bit too impatient, but I feel like I can't sit around forever. I move the fire lizard up, I shoot at the dragon knights, and then realise I can actually get in charge range of the eagle. And because the charge range and shooting range of the fire lizard is actually the same, I think in hindsight what I should have done is shot at the eagle, rather than trying to taking off even one model of the dragon knights would have been really nice. I mean, with the attack anyway, but had a low chance but potential to even wipe that eagle in one hit, so should have taken that. And then I think my opponent kind of maybe realised what I did, which the snakes is going to be important, because they don't take the shot on the fire lizard, they instead go for the jungle swarm, really pulling this down. Again, I don't mind that too much. And then again, this sort of impatient, I want to, I don't know, like shock my opponent into something, get them thinking, move my pterodactyls right up into the face of their city guard. The new Braves have the charge on the city guard, and if I can get the double charge there, I'm okay with that. I'm expecting, though, my opponent to counter with the pterodactyls, which I can then flee because they have the good movement too, which should move the noble down right into and so my crocs can then sort of like flank into them. That was the plan with this move. A little bit aggressive. I don't think I'm opened up for a kind of rear charge by coming around here because of these units. My opponent just kind of backs off and decides, sure, they'll take the flank there. And Dragon Knights are just in range for the Braves here, so they get a kind of double charge onto the Braves. However, strange one, kind of disaster for me. Weird that flying units that ignore cover, I suppose. I mean, this makes sense that they didn't continue moving, they stopped in front of the cover, but considering flying units ignore impassable terrain for pretty much everything else, including sort of like line of sight weird stuff, this is a bit unusual that they would just kind of stop here, which means there's actually no way for either my T-Rex or my Crocs to get around this building to get a good charge onto the noble. So instead, I set up the kind of the double team here for the knights, although make a bit of a mistake, which we'll see in a second, and then the flank onto the crocs. The charge here, my opponent has +1 skill, but I get I have an additional wound and an additional attack, so I think I'm pretty favoured here, although that's close. And as expected, or I would expect for the Braves to just get completely wiped in this combat. Honestly, if I can survive with any alive against the Dragon Knights, and yeah, pretty brutal. Yeah, pretty happy, because then they could rally and maybe do something. But as I said, made a bit of a mistake because I could have left a jungle swarm right here and not invited the charge from the noble, because they were stuck there. They, I guess, would have had to have taken this, which I think at the time maybe I didn't want, so maybe I wanted to bait that, but then but now I don't have, the units for here, and this is going to be huge because yes, when I fled, my opponent got stuck against the building again, meaning when the city guard fled, I now have my crocs back exposed to the elf noble. Devastating. So as it stands, we're still in a reasonable position. My pterodactyls fail, I think it's an 8 up bravery, something like that. Twice that was, because if you remember, they fled. So I had that round that I didn't mention. Last round they failed it, and then they failed a second time, ran off the board. Unfortunate there. But here I really need a big turn from the T-Rex and the commander. And they whiff all their attacks. Not all of them. Get 3 wounds through in the end. It's not too bad, but yeah, it's starting to get a little scary. I haven't taken out anything of my opponents apart from a couple of models here, and thankfully my crocs do rally, and I pop the Warcry now. I didn't last turn because actually I don't think it would have mattered on the T-Rex's attacks, and I was thinking even if I don't force them to flee from the flank and they turn, it would be more useful in this turn anyways. But I pop it now, and then again hoping to kill the eagle so I can have the fire lizard in play, but I'm not able to do so, and they just continue. They're on 1 wound each, continue just slapping at each other. But we do get lucky this time around and force my opponent to flee with an 11 on their 7 up discipline test. But if you know anything about Conclave these days, it's not exactly going to matter. But another stroke of luck, maybe undeserved after all these misplays, but look at that. My opponent, like my T-Rex, is now open to be shot at, but let's just make all of those saves. Love to see it. And yeah, here, so, and this really comes down, I think, as I said, I haven't taken out anything of my opponent. I wanted to move the crocs here to be as close as possible to the city guard so they can't flee. I'm not confident about this combat anyway, but I figure I need this. I need to get lucky here to win this. They position really nicely, so no unit would be able to fit in there for the flank. And I don't want them to just flee and then rally. So I move my crocs as close as possible there, exposes the side, so I move the braves in the way of the noble, so they don't have that. I couldn't quite get into position to shoot the Dragon Knights. I mean, would have been unlikely to kill them anyway, but was trying to see maybe if I could get just into shoot and turn to kind of block this off, but I wasn't able to. I move as far up as I can with the T-Rex, but I've completely lost track of time in this match, and it's at this point that I realise we're going into as mutually assured destruction. Yep, they take each other out. we go into the final turn, which I didn't realise up until this point. And that's terrible for me because I was kind of expecting to be able to take this. Expecting these to maybe die to the noble or flee, and then try and get lucky there and at least take out the Dragon Knights. And if I can get lucky there, maybe we win it on points. However, because it's the final turn, my opponent has first charge. Really smartly, just charges into the Braves with both units there, can't even flee. And yeah, that's a really smart move in the end. That's going to be all she wrote. I think even if we had one more turn, not sure if I'd been able to swing this one. It really would have depended on this combat. And actually, we ended up winning, but my opponent makes the 7-up discipline. And as we take a look at the scores, there's still a good amount of stuff left, but yeah, it's a pretty clear victory for my opponent. So as we load into game 3, again, random scenario, but no objectives on this one. And again, we get first turn, my opponent gets final move. We set up in the middle again, kind of in a blob, at the very least on this map. As we zoom out, see how my opponent is deployed. Maybe a bit more struggle for them with their shooting, with their kind of sight lines around the terrain here. But yeah, once again, we just kind of like move up and accept medicine as we get shot at. And I guess it didn't work in the first one, but again, I go for this very aggressive move, kind of baiting out the charge here effectively, or not, well, forcing the charge, unless my opponent wants to get the noble involved and have a whole kind of scrum in the middle, which I can then move around. I move up, so my opponent either has to, take the charge here or retreat, and hopefully then I'll be able to kind of like swarm around. This is almost like a chump charge, just kind of sacrificing these guys to then hopefully get the kind of my Braves around the side here, another unit in front, and yeah, trying to just like force the issue. I've had enough of all this sort of dancing around, but I get greedy. I noticed that actually the fire lizard can get just in range of the eagle here to shoot, and it does so. And he takes 2 of the 4 wounds off, but now I've actually blocked myself from getting the flank charge with the Braves. Move my T-Rex up, and my opponent shoots at the Crocs there. I move the T-Rex up to kind of like just be in range of the noble. I'm a bit worried about what else they can do. Maybe this was all a bit too impatient. As we move to this charge phase, fairly all in. My opponent gets the flank here. I don't mind that. There's only 2 left on. The Crocs could be able to do that. And I don't think this is very good for me, although the Jungle Swarm have what looks like 9 wounds left. So at the very least, they should survive. But then it all really, I suppose, then comes down to this. And at this point, I message my opponent in Discord and be like, well, we're all in. This is really, it's going to be the match right here decided between what happens in these combats. I wasn't sure if I should move these around here for a while. I'm not sure why I moved them there. I think maybe to be in range of any of these if one of them kind of goes awry, that sort of thing. But it allows my opponent to get shot off. We pop Warcry, my opponent pops their potion, and here we go. Let's get into this and take a look. So, you don't want to adjust that. We get 2 wins through on the Elf Noble, but my opponent, Potion of Power, Relentless, all that good stuff, and Elven Mastery gets 4 through, taking out my Warlord. But we only get 3 attacks, 2 through, and my opponent is able to get a couple more through with their mount, and the T-Rex fails the 7-up leadership test and runs. What's worse though? There you go as well. My Crocs aren't able to take it out, and we fail another 7-up, and the Crocs one as well. And then this combat here actually doesn't go too badly. I think we were even, but it's not going to go well over time. I've killed practically nothing, and my opponent's got me on a run. So, and yeah, my T-Rex fails the rally test. So yeah, I think at this point, normally I would concede, although this tournament points difference does matter. So I'll just play it out for my, opponent's sake anyway, see if they can like wipe me out. And I think they're like almost able to, as we just watch the massacre unfold. And as we take a look at the scoreboard, yeah, as we can see, very decisive victory there. My opponent was even able to shoot off the 2 remaining Crocs at the end. And it was at this point I was starting to make lunch, and then we were just chatting about how to submit the scores when we realised that we needed to play a third game, because even though it's best out of 3, if I had won the third game, I would still get an addition 1. So we decided to play a third one, but just super speed round, I think, but neither of us had much time. So I'm not going to show it here, although the long and short of it is I completely grasped defeat out of the jaws of victory. I think it was going really well for me, and I just completely threw about 3 times. I think it was like difficult to lose from the position that I was in, and I managed to do it. So in the end, for the tournament, what it means is my opponent gets 2 game points, because that's the maximum you get, even if you get the 3 wins which they did. And in terms of unit points, so the difference, I think it was something like 567, maybe more, that Alhael beat me by. So yeah, really great games. Unfortunate that I got first turn both times and no objective both times. But I have to say, the list that my opponent was running, that is not an easy list to play well. You have to be really kind of careful, deliberate. It's a very thinking man's kind of list, and my opponent played it brilliantly. I made a few mistakes along the way. Would love to know your thoughts on where I could improve, where I went wrong. I know I pointed some out. I know both times I got a little bit aggressive. I think always when your opponent has that kind of shooting, I feel the pressure to get into combat as quickly as possible and like force the issue and I'm always, I think, I like when my opponent has to react to what I'm doing rather than being the one reacting in SOVL. But yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think of these videos. As always, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Follow the YouTube algorithm. It really helps out. Recommend it to anyone else as well that you might think would enjoy it. Check out the other SOVL PvP content creators in the description and the Discord server where you can find more information about this tournament. And until next time, bye bye.